There are nights when I still see her, standing there motionless, as if time had frozen just for her. No matter how much time passes, every time my eyes, that image comes back. The empty sidewalk, the blinking, and there she is, as if she was waiting for something that never came. It was always in the same spot, in the darkest corner of the lot. He never spoke, never moved. He just looked at me, or maybe not even that, because in truth, I never got to see face. There's a kind of silence that isn't just the absence of sound, it's the absence of life. That part of the shift, around 3 a.m, when even the insects seem afraid to make a sound. It was in that kind of silence that I began to feel that I wasn't anymore. At first I thought it was sleep, stress, or some trick my mind was playing on me, but it wasn't. And the more I tried to it, the more present it became, until one night when I knew it wasn't just a vision, it was a warning. I don't usually talk it, in fact I never have, because honestly, I don't know if anyone would believe me. I doubted myself for weeks. But there are things that don't go away with time. They stick, they wait, and if you turn your back, they come after you. It's been a while now, but the smell of damp dust and rust still makes me nauseous. The cold sweat, the flashlight shaking, the click of my own echoing too loudly, as if the building were hearing everything, as if she were too. It's strange how certain memories don't follow logical order. They don't come like a movie. They come like flashes, a sound, a smell, a shiver. And you know it, you're there again. That night everything seemed normal, except for the unusual cold. And the fact that the light in the blinked on its own, even with the key turned off. But before we continue, have you ever seen someone who be there, standing in the dark, as if waiting for you? Because what I witnessed that week is beyond explanation. And strangest part, it hasn't even started yet. Do you like this kind of story? Then leave a like and follow the channel. There are things here not everyone has the courage to listen to until the end. I'd gotten used to not anything new after 11 at night. Most people don't understand what it means to be a night watchman. They think it's just around watching the camera, walking around once or twice and waiting for time to pass. In a way, that's exactly what it is. But one thing no one tells you, silence, it changes you. At first, it seems like a small detail until you realize that you're listening to the sound, your own breathing, more than any other noise around you. Over you start to hear even things you shouldn't. The building was one of the oldest in the commercial area, with 3 floors, iron windows that opened properly, and hallways that smelled of moldy paper even after cleaning. During the day, it was just another place with a few law offices, accounting offices, and a dentist's office on the 3rd floor. At night, it was my territory, cell, my cave, and I felt good there in that abandoned place. No one bothered me, no one asked me anything. The truth is that after all, this kind solitude almost served as a relief. I was 43 at the time. I'd been through things I didn't expect to go through so soon. And I'm not about illness or job loss. I'm talking about the kind of rupture you feel in your flesh. My marriage had ended in such a cold way that today I can't remember the last conversation as an argument. It was more of a hollowing out. One day simply wasn't there anymore. She packed up her things, left a letter on the fridge, and that was it. 17 years, 2 grown children, and a day of shared plans, reduced to a half-page note. What hurt the most wasn't her leaving. It was the feeling that, deep down, I knew it was going to, I just didn't want to see it. After the separation, I tried to maintain my routine. I continued going to my previous job in a complex. But after a panic attack I had during a shift, the kind where your whole body locks up and the floor feels like it's sinking, I quit job and got away from everything. That's when this building came along. A family friend said they needed someone to cover a night shift, temporarily. Low pay. Business I accepted on the spot. At first it was almost therapeutic. I would arrive at 9 p.m., have my coffee, do my first round, check the locks. The emergency radios, check the cameras. Then I would sit in the guardhouse, reading something, listening to the AM radio, writing things down in a notebook. It made me feel good to be there. The dim light, the sound of the generator in the distance, the sound of the gate when a car left later. It was almost comforting. The feeling of control was a kind of consolation. Inside, I knew where the alarms, the codes. Outside, in the real world, nothing made sense anymore. I've never been one to believe in things that out of the ordinary. I always thought the world already had too much going on without trying to invent. Things that can't be seen. People die every day without explanation. Couples break up for trivial reasons. Children disappear without a trace. And if this is real, you don't need ghosts to scare anyone. Life already takes care of that. And I had become someone like that. Practical, direct, apathetic. The kind of person who hears a knock on the wall and thinks of a loose pipe, strong wind, old structure. Never anything beyond that. But when I was skeptical, even when I was numb, there were nights when something would slip through my fingers. Little sensations. A draft that came where it shouldn't. A metallic sound that seemed too far away. An elevator that would activate for a few seconds without anyone. Little things. Things you only notice when you've been completely alone for too long. Never paid much attention to them. I used to laugh at myself. My mind plays tricks, that's all, I would say, as if repeating that would be enough to me sane. The early mornings passed slowly, but they had a rhythm. Around 2:30 a.m., I would do another round. Always found everything as before. Then I would go back to the guardhouse and write down the times, the weather, and any minor incidents in my... Sometimes I would write down things that had nothing to do with it, like stronger wind today or strange smell on the floor. There was no one to show it to, no one would supervise, but it was part of a ritual. I had to register, even if it was just to myself, that something was being observed there. One of those nights I realized I was more tired than usual, physically but mentally. That feeling of being inside your own body, but with your head a little out of place. You know when the world seems a little muffled, like you're watching everything from underwater. That's how I felt. I tried not to pay attention, but it took was a fly hitting the lamp in the guardhouse with a sharp pop for me to almost drop my coffee mug. My heart raced as if it were being, and there was no one there, just the faint hum of the transformer on the pole. I stopped. I took a deep breath. I at myself in the glass of the guardhouse, reflected in the darkness, and for a second, I thought there was another face behind mine. It was quick. Quick, I blinked. Nothing. Just my reflection, tired, with sunken eyes, unshaven. I smiled sideways as if mocking my own madness. But the smile laughed, because at that very moment I heard the sound, low, rhythmic, like footsteps, yes, steps, outside on the sidewalk. I got up, I opened the door to the guardhouse, flashlight in hand. The light from the street lamp was failing, making the night seem even darker. And footsteps stopped, just like that, as if they had never existed. My skin crawled all over. It was as if the air had changed temperature. Not but dense. I could feel the weight of nothingness around me, and that was when, for the first time in months, I felt watched. I went back, locking the door with more force than necessary. My body was on alert, but my mind refused to admit anything abnormal. Probably a cat, or drunk who walked by on the sidewalk, I thought. But even with the excuse ready, my hand shook slightly as I went to write in the notebook. I write anything. After that, for a few nights, everything seemed to have returned to normal, but something in me had already changed. It was as if building, that shift, was trying to tell me something, as if it wanted my attention. And in a way I can't explain, it succeeded. Now, was it really the building? Or was there something or someone waiting for me to finally notice? Have you ever felt like you were ignoring that deep down you knew was real? Because looking back, maybe everything was already happening long that night when I finally saw her. But that's not even the strangest part. Not yet. I remember exact position of my body when I first saw it. I had my elbow resting on the edge of the guardhouse, staring at the street without looking. That empty look of someone who has seen the clock go past 2 in the morning too many times. The cold coffee mug, forgotten by my side. The muffled of the AM radio whispering some random conversation that I could no longer hear. Everything was in place. Everything was as always. And something wasn't right. At first it was an uneasy feeling in my stomach. It wasn't fear or pain. It was the kind of tightness you feel when you're in a room where something strange has just happened. A kind of soundless presence. A different emptiness the air. I stood up slowly, as if the gesture itself needed permission, and walked to the door of the guardhouse, pushing it just enough to see outside more clearly. And that's when I saw it, near the side gate, standing exactly on the border between the shadow of wall and the intermittent glow of the street lamp, was someone. Short, thin, long hair. Or maybe couldn't see him clearly. His back was turned, and he was still, completely still. His arms were loose at his sides, his feet together, as if were waiting or listening. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. The way we instinctively do when we see something our brain hasn't yet decided is, but the figure was still there. And the detail that disturbed me was no wind, but the hair moved as if it had a life of its own, slowly as if it were floating. I took 2 steps, feeling the cold cement floor beneath my boots. The flashlight was still attached to my belt, forgotten, and the lights on the gate flickering in a strange, almost hypnotic rhythm. I don't know why, but I didn't call out. I didn't shout or ask if I help. I just stood there, feeling my heart race for no logical reason, trying to decipher what was in front of me. And it was in that fraction of a second in which I considered taking another step, that the child was simply no longer there. It disappeared. Noise, no movement, not even a transition, as if it had been erased from the image. 1 second it was there, the next, nothing, empty. The shadow on ground still seemed to exist for an instant afterward, like a mark of a presence that was no longer there. My first reaction was, it's always like that, isn't it? The mind races to find logic. Maybe he ran, I thought. He went into the alley next door, hid the car, and left the way he came. But I knew, deep down in the same place where we keep the feelings we don't have the courage to accept. It wasn't that. Still, I stepped out of the gate. I shone a light into the corners. I looked under the cars, between the walls. Nothing. No sound. Trace. The air had a strange metallic smell, like wet iron, a smell that stuck in the back of my throat. I coughed softly, swallowing my own anxiety. Walked back to the guardhouse, trying to convince my body to sit down again. I sat down. I stood there for a few minutes, staring at the camera screen, though I knew that part of the gate didn't show the installation's angles. I started writing in my notebook just to keep myself busy. But I didn't down what I saw, not then. I wrote something about the weather. Cloudy, still air. 2 words, nothing more. I spent the rest of the repeating to myself what seemed most acceptable. It must have been a teenager. The son of someone who lived in the neighboring, he might have been scared of me, run away without me noticing. It wasn't hard to believe. The lighting poor, the street was quiet. It was a simple, comfortable explanation, but something about it didn't fit, because nobody stops like that. Don't just stand there in the dark, alone, with their backs to the street. No normal child does that, and if that were all, that would be fine. But was a particular silence at that moment, a silence that felt like it was trapped inside my head, like the sound around me had been sucked out. For the rest of the week, I tried to forget. I followed my routine, rounds, notes, bad coffee, radio crackling. But every time I approached the gatehouse, my eyes were drawn to that same corner of the gate, the same place, the same line between light and shadow. Even when there was nothing, the silence seemed to repeat its previous format. Sometimes, we want so much to believe that everything is normal, that close our eyes even to things that have touched our skin. Now tell me, would you stay there knowing that something might be watching you, even if you can't see it anymore? The second night came as if the one had never happened. During the day, I convinced myself that I had overdone it. I slept badly, ate worse, and still that rational conviction that everything could be explained. Tired people see things, that's a fact. The eye plays tricks. The mind repeats, the body responds to stress as it can. Normal, everything is under control. But deep down, something inside me was on alert. An almost unconscious alert, as if part of my attention was permanently focused on the side gate. The rest of the night could go on as usual, but when AM rolled around, I knew exactly where my gaze would stop, and it was no different. The same in the same spot, from behind. She was there, again, identical, same posture, same arms at my sides, same dim streetlight flickering over my head, as if the scene had been repeated on a loop, a presence frozen in time. For a moment, I felt ridiculous. Instead of acting, running, speaking, I just watched, static. The air seemed denser than the night before, as if each breath required effort. A part me screamed that this didn't make sense. Another just watched, as if waiting to understand. This time, I had the idea of checking the eye, glanced at the monitor, looking for the angle of the gate. Nothing, black screen, interrupted signal. I checked, gave the equipment a light tap. The rest of the images were working normally, but that one, no. It was as if someone had turned off just part. I tried to rationalize even that. Bad contact, interference, dirt on the lens. But deep down, I knew. On the third night, I arrived feeling tense. My hand shook slightly as I inserted the key into the electrical panel in the guardhouse. It was cold, that I was tired. I pretended so much that I almost believed it. During the initial round, I noticed that the weather was dry, but the parking lot had patches of moisture that looked new, and a smell, sweet, a strange, artificial smell. Like talcum powder mixed with, it wasn't the kind of thing you notice right away. It's a smell you only notice because it shouldn't be there. And at exact spot on the gate where the child had appeared, there was a toy, a small plastic horse, dirty, missing a leg, left aside as if it had forgotten in a silent rush. I approached slowly, the flashlight low, my heart racing. There were no footprints, no wind to drag it away. It was as if it had simply appeared there. I put the object in a box, left it on the guardhouse table, and spent the shift looking at it, as if I expected it to move on its own. On the fourth night, the tension early. It began before 2 in the morning, like a wave coming in before a storm. The silence in the building was different. It was deeper, aware, as if the building itself was waiting for something. The light in the second-floor hallway blinked at intervals that seemed too rhythmic, like code. I even tried to turn it off at the switchboard, but it came back on by itself a few minutes later, and that was when I heard the laughter. Wasn't a laugh, nor a loud sound. It was the kind of laugh that seemed to contain some pain behind it. Short, muffled, childlike. Coming from the end the hallway, the sound echoed with a clarity that made me freeze inside. I left the guardhouse with the flashlight in hand, my steady but my stomach in knots. I climbed the 2 flights of stairs and walked through the hallways lit only by emergency lights. Nothing. No sign anyone, no open doors, no repeated sound, but the echo of that laugh still vibrated in my chest, like a recent memory that wouldn't let go. Went back to the guardhouse. I closed the door. I locked it with the key, the bolt, and pushed a chair against the doorknob. Did I feel ashamed? Maybe. It was a lesser shame than fear. And then, on the table where I left my folder with the records, there was something new. A paper. Plain paper. Folded 4. When I opened it, I saw the drawing, made with crayon, crooked, childish lines. It showed a grey building surrounded by dark walls. And the center of the drawing, in front of the gate, a small figure, from the back, with her hair spread out. And a flashlight pointed directly at the hand that held the flashlight was mine. I recognized my uniform, drawn in a faded shade of blue. The initials scrawled in the corner. I was there, inside that paper. Someone or something had drawn the scene I was living. But what really stopped was what was written on the back of the sheet, in the same childish handwriting. "You see it now." But I've always been here. Don't remember how long I stood there, staring at it. Maybe minutes, maybe longer. Time seemed to have frozen inside the... It was as if the air itself had become thick, heavy, hard to swallow. And I could no longer pretend it was coincidence. Just imagination, something, someone, some presence was interacting with me. It wasn't passive, wasn't random, it was targeted. And now, she knew I was paying attention. Do you know what's worse than seeing something you don't understand? It's that this something is seeing you back. What about you? Have you ever felt like something was watching you, even when there was no one on the fifth night? Something inside me broke what remained of my... I can't explain what it was exactly. Maybe it was the accumulation of signs. Maybe the silent starting scream louder than my denial. But I remember the feeling clearly. I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep just watching afar. That figure, that child, that silent ritual, all of it was happening for a reason. And I needed to understand or confront it, or put an end to it once and for all. I spent the beginning of my shift on high alert. Every creak every change in the fluorescent lighting in the hallway, every noise I normally ignored, it all became a clue. My coffee mug went twice before I touched it. My eyes kept drifting, almost instinctively, to the side gate. I knew she was coming. And I knew that time I wasn't going to stand still. When the clock struck 2:36, my body was already moving. I got up from my chair, unlocked the door, and stood with my hand on the latch, my muscles tense, feeling my breathing heavier. A cold sweat ran down between my shoulder, even with the icy early morning wind. And then she appeared. Exact spot. Same position. With her back, standing between the shadow of the wall and the flickering light of the street lamp. But there was a subtle difference. The head was slightly to the side, as if it was listening. I left, this time without hesitation. I walked straight ahead, my steps firm and quick. Flashlight in my hand, my heart pounding so hard it seemed to echo in my temples. The figure didn't move. It remained motionless, as always. I must have been about 25 feet away when it turned, slowly, just enough for me to see half of his face, or so I thought, and then she ran, but like a normal child. There was something unnatural about the movement. It was fast, yes, but also sliding, as if the body were not following normal laws of weight, of friction, as if the feet were barely touching the ground. She turned the corner of the side wall and disappeared from view. I ran after it. My body moved automatically, driven by something between curiosity, fury. I didn't think. I didn't ponder. I just followed. My footsteps echoed on the concrete. The flashlight in my hand. When I turned the corner, I came face to face with the gate, closed, locked. Thick chain intertwined in the middle, heavy hanging. I stopped dead in my tracks, panting, confused. I touched the metal of the chain, cold, untouched. The padlock was locked, the key with me in my pants pocket. There was no way anyone, much less a child, could have gotten through there. It was impossible. The space between bars was too wide. There was no hole in the wall, no gap, no loose bars. It was simply impossible. I stood there, staring at as if I were staring at an equation that defies all logic. Drops of sweat ran down my chin, even with the wind cutting my face. I felt pang in my stomach, a kind of nausea that didn't come from the physical, but from my mind, trying to process something that didn't fit into any explanation. She had disappeared again. Only this time, I had proof that the she had escaped did not exist as it should have. And that was when the question struck me. Was she running away, or maybe just were taking me somewhere? I turned back, more slowly, still trying to catch breath. My eyes scanned the floor, the walls, any sign of footprints, of touch, of trails. But there was nothing. The place too clean, clean of presence, clean of logic. I walked back to the guardhouse slowly, like someone stepping off the stage after a poorly play. Each step was heavier. The lantern, which had been steady, now hung from my hand like a dead, and when I sat down again, still without speaking, without writing, without even drinking the warm water from the cup, I noticed a different sound coming from the security radio. Hiss, then a dry snap, and then that chilled my blood. A childish voice, almost a whisper coming from the speakers. "You saw it, right?" I stopped breathing. For a second, my heart had forgotten how to beat. The voice did not repeat. The radio went silent as if it had never been turned on. But the question there, hanging in the air, heavier than any chain, "You saw it, right?" Yes, I saw it. And now, there was no way to unsee it. What I know yet was how much more she wanted me to see. Would you have gone after it, or would he have pretended nothing had happened? Even he heard that voice. The next day, I arrived at work earlier than usual, not out of zeal or commitment, but because my mind would not let me home without thinking about her. The image of the child, the locked gate, on the radio. Everything went back and forth inside me, as if my head had been invaded by a film that played on loop, even when I closed my eyes. Know when you try to convince yourself that you're exaggerating, but everything around you starts to act as if it's saying otherwise? That was it, and was what made me come back early, try to understand, try to discover anything. At the back entrance, as I walked down the ground floor hallway, met Mrs. Marlene, the building's oldest cleaning lady, a woman in her early 60s. Her skin was worn by the sun and cleaning products, her face by that constant expression of someone who has seen more than she wants to, but never says anything until called upon. She was the type who get involved in other people's conversations, but she also didn't miss a thing. I had never exchanged more than a good morning her, but that day she looked at me differently. There was something in her eyes, something she and me, as if she saw a new shadow on my face. I tried to keep the tone casual. I started talking about the weather. The hallway light flickered by itself, the strange feeling that place sometimes caused at night. Light things, but she didn't answer right away. He stopped scrubbing the floor with the squeegee, looked at me slowly over the top of his crooked glasses, and said, almost in a whisper, "You saw too, right?" The question came without surprise, without shock, as if I had already known that I would see it one day. I still for a second, trying to understand if she was joking, if she had heard something, if someone had spoken to her. But no, her tone was serious, was accurate. I didn't answer right away. The silence was heavy, and the only thing I could do was lower my eyes and then nod, almost imperceptibly. Looked back at the floor, continued rubbing slowly and said as if remembering an old pain, "This has happened before. It's not new." It's not just I approached, feeling half ridiculous and half desperate. I asked her what she knew, what she had heard, what had already happened in place. She took her time. The silence between one sentence and the next was like a heavy curtain that she lifted with, and when she spoke, there was no more hesitation. It was as if she was lifting a weight that had been stored for years. That sidewalk, it was once covered in blood. A girl, about 9, 10 years old most. Her mother was a secretary here, a long time ago. She worked on the second floor. One day she stayed late. It was a Friday. It was asked the girl to wait in the lobby while she finished some files. But the girl got tired. She went out on her own. She went to the gate. She looked at me as if she was measuring my insides, and she continued. One of the lawyers here was driving. He had been drinking. He left a hurry. They say his vision was blurry. The girl crossed slowly and he didn't see her. Marlene sighed heavily. Not from physical, but the kind that comes from a memory that has never been digested. She died instantly. On the same sidewalk where you say you saw, where the streetlight doesn't turn on properly. Always there. Always there. The information fell upon me, a dense wave. I felt a chill run up my spine. I tried to process it, to understand. I asked what happened next. If their police press, a trial. And she did something that chilled me more than anything I had ever experienced in that building. She smiled. Nothing was in the papers. The man's was influential. An old lawyer, a big client, a lot of money involved. The girl's mother disappeared after a while. There were rumors, saying she had lost her mind, others that she moved without warning. All I know is that she never showed up again, and the case was hushed, buried along with the child. No plaque, no memorial, nothing. I remained silent. My throat was dry. The image of the girl standing the gate now carried a new weight, a new meaning. I wasn't seeing something random. That figure had a story, a pain. For being there, I asked if anyone else had seen it. Some security guards. None of them lasted long. One quit overnight. Another had a fit-in. He locked the guardhouse from the inside and started screaming to himself. After that, they started changing personnel, always temporary. New people, like you. Words hung in the air, and an awkward silence settled between us. It wasn't one of awkwardness. It was one of respect. As if was now a secret shared between two strangers. Before leaving, she wiped her hands on her apron, looked into my eyes once more and said, "She wants to scare anyone, but she also doesn't want to be forgotten." After that, she simply went back to she was doing, as if she hadn't said anything, as if she hadn't in just a few minutes turned the entire basis of my reason down. I climbed to the guard post, like someone carrying their own name carved in lead. Each step creaked as if what I was about to accept. The girl existed, she died there, and for some reason, I was still trying to be seen. But why? Now? And why me? After that conversation with Mrs. Marlene, I went back to work like someone who enters a house that has already caught fire. You know the place is still standing, but you also know that nothing there is reliable. Everything looks the same on the outside, but on the inside it already burned, has already changed. It has become fragile. My mind wouldn't turn off. The image of the child now had a name, a sound, an untold story, a presence that was no longer just a shadow. It was memory, and memory, when it refuses, screams. That night, something changed. I felt it in the first few minutes. The building was alive. That's the only way I can it. The sound of the automatic door seemed louder. The echoes from the hallways sounded deeper. As if there was a space, the walls that I'd never noticed before. And the silence. Oh, the silence was no longer the absence of sound. It was the of something coming. It was close to midnight when I first saw the footprints. I was coming back from my rounds on the 3rd floor, walking the side hallway to the 2nd floor, when I noticed the footprints on the floor. Small footprints, like a child's. But what stopped me was their size. It was the fact that the floor was completely dry, except for those wet marks, as if someone had stepped out of a pool and was slowly walking, one foot after the other, wetting the clean tile floor. The yellow light from the made the waters shine, look fresh, freshly made. I followed each footprint with a tight chest. They came from the end of and stopped in front of the elevator. The button for the ground floor was lit. Someone had called the elevator. But the logs showed no recent entry, and I was alone. I approached the elevator slowly. Like someone approaching a door about to reveal something, don't want to see. The display read 3, the highest floor in the building. And it was slowly. The light on the panel was blinking as if the electricity was wavering. He reached the ground floor. The doors opened with that muffled sound. But what was inside chilled me completely. In the left corner of the elevator, leaning against the wall as it had been left there by an absent-minded child, was a toy. The same plastic horse I had kept in the guardhouse 2 ago. Its leg was broken. It was covered in dirt. That was impossible. The guardhouse was I hadn't let anyone in, and the toy was inside a box under my desk. How did it get there? Who put it in the elevator? How? I churned, a bitter taste rising in my throat. There was no wind, no sound, but the elevator seemed to breathe, as if every second inside it was. I walked over, slowly reached out, and grabbed the toy with 2 fingers, as if it explode at the touch. Nothing happened. The silence continued, but inside me, something snapped. On the way back to the guardhouse, I tried to run, but my pace was too fast to seem calm. My hands were shaking. The toy was heavy, even though it was light. And the guardhouse door, some reason, seemed harder to open. I locked it twice. I sat down. I leaned my back against the wall as if trying to glue my soul back to my body. And it happened. The radio. At exactly midnight, with a precision that is unusual for analog devices like that, the radio in the guardhouse turned on itself. A dry crackle, a background hum, no station, no frequency, just the sound of static and interference. I didn't touch it, I didn't turn it off. I just listened, and in the midst of the hissing, as if it were coming from inside a well full of and time, came the voice, childish, low. "Why didn't you see me?" It wasn't a scream. It was a question, a whispered question with a kind of pain that only someone very forgetful could feel. A pain that doesn't accuse. And that was the part that destroyed me the most. It wasn't the shock, it was the guilt, because in that moment I understood. She didn't want me, that wasn't it. She wanted to be remembered, recognized, seen, and somehow I was the only one who was seeing her again. The one who hadn't turned away. The radio went silent. The hissing stopped abruptly, as if a blade had cut the thread of sound. And the darkness, it seemed darker, more present, more aware. I spent the rest of the shift with the flashlight on next to me. Even under artificial light, I was shaking, but it wasn't just from fear. It was a tremor from something that was changing inside me. From then on, it was no longer about what was happening. It was about what I had missed before. And maybe now it was too late not to look. Have ever ignored something that just wanted to be seen? What if that something was still waiting, just for you? It took me a few days to pluck up courage, to go through the old files. It wasn't just fear of what I might find. It was also the feeling that by those dusty folders in the building's archives, something inside me would be beyond return. It was like breaking a contract between the unknown and ignorance. As long as I didn't know, I could still pretend. I could still try to sleep. He still tell me it was all just in my head. But the truth is that, after that question on the radio, "Why didn't you see me?" I couldn't look. That voice followed me in my thoughts, in the gaps between my steps. The silence of the early morning. It was as if it wouldn't let me forget, as if it was leading me to something I needed to see. The basement of where they kept the physical records was below the service staircase. It was a damp, cramped place that smelled of musty paper rust. The lights flickered constantly, and the files were stacked without any logic. I spent hours in there. The stuffy air, pulling out old boxes, scrawled names, dates in faded pen. My fingers were black with dust, my throat scratchy. And it was in a blue with the tag HR 2007 to 2011 that I found it. The name Jorge Vasconcelos. Function Night Watchman. Year of entry 2008. Of departure no date. Reason not informed. Curious, no medical records, no notice, no termination, just a disappearance. As if he had stopped showing and no one had asked why. Flipping through the pages further, I found an internal police report, poorly written. It simply said that Jorge had left his post during the night shift. Possible psychological breakdown, someone had scribbled in the corner. But what me completely was an attachment, an informal report written by hand with shaky handwriting, as if it had been done in a hurry. Side gate, always in the same place. always at 2:37. When I got closer, she disappeared. I thought I was imagining it. Until she appeared inside the building. Vision blurred. My hands were sweating and the paper almost slipped from my fingers. It was the same hours, the same apparitions, and at the end of the page, like a confession from someone who had already crossed the limit of a single underlined sentence. I think it was me. There was no explanation. There were no more sheets, nothing about an accident, nothing that formally linked that man to the child's death. But I knew. The car that had hit there was his. The record matched what Marlene said. The security guard, drunk, the silence of the company, the disappearance. The being repeated night after night, the waiting. She wasn't there by chance. That child was waiting, always in the same place. Always with her turned, always silent, like someone waiting for something that never came, like someone waiting for an apology. My chest tightened a way I had never felt before, a mixture of guilt and compassion, as if something had broken inside me that wasn't even mine. For first time, I looked at everything with different eyes, and I realized she didn't want revenge. She never did. She just wanted to be seen. She wanted someone to say what no one had the courage to say. That night, before I started my shift, I stopped at a 24-hour flower shop and bought a bouquet, simple flowers, white, with a light, almost imperceptible scent. I also picked up a small bear with black eyes sewn on and a crooked seam on the side. The cashier asked who it was for. All I said was, "It's for who's been waiting too long." I arrived at the building just before 2. The wind was cold and the sky was starless. I walked in silence to side gate, the place where she always appeared, where it all began. I placed the flowers on the ground. I knelt down. I placed the teddy bear on the right side. The streetlight flickered as usual, but that night was more quiet. A thick silence, full of things. I stood there, with my knees on the cold concrete, breathing hard. I smelled the night, the weight of accumulated pain, and spoke almost in a whisper. "Sorry, I'll see you now." There was no wind, no sound, but I felt it, like a light. Almost human warmth that passed by side, a different shiver that didn't scare me. It just left an emptiness, fullness. I looked up. She was there. From behind, from the front, about 2 meters away from me, tiny, pale face, huge, sad eyes, and for the first time, she smiled. A short smile. Sad, but at peace. And then it disappeared. Simple as that. No noise, no shine, no scene. As if she had accomplished what she came to do. As if had finally said what she needed to hear. That night I finished my shift in silence. I sat in the guardhouse and looked at the camera. They were all working. The side gate too. Nothing jammed. Nothing fell down. In the following, she didn't come back. He never appeared again. Not on the cameras, not in the hallways. Not a single toy was out of place. Not a sign. The building went back to being just a building, but I was never just a security guard again. I carry that story deep within and to this day, every time I see a child standing alone on the street, my eyes search for what the world insists ignoring. Would you have had the courage to say what no one said, or would he have turned his face away? Everyone else. Today, the building no longer exists. It disappeared like an old sound, swallowed up by time. They tore it all down in one weekend, and its place built a modern parking lot with cameras in every corner, motion sensors and cold lighting that never fails. The new concrete covers there used to be cracks, rust and silence, but none of that erased what was felt there. None of that took away that something remained, because it did. Every time I walk down that street, even when I try to avoid it and change my path purpose, I feel a strange chill. A chill that comes from within, not from without. As if the ground still carries the memory of everything. As if the walls that existed before had left something trapped in the air, on the sidewalk. The shadows that were not demolished with the bricks. And no matter how much I tried to rationalize it, pretend it was just a fit. Just accumulated, just unresolved trauma. I know it wasn't. I saw it, I felt it, and I was part of it. There's no way to unsee it. There's no way to the story is over because the building collapsed, because some stories continue where they left off. And sometimes, all they want for someone to pay attention. There are people who pass by places like this and don't feel anything. Others look away, as if something bothers them, even without any clear reason. But I always look. Because I learned that there are presences that do not seek, they just want to be recognized. They want someone to see what was ignored. They want to feel what no one else wants to remember. And if one day you are alone, late at night, and you see a child standing in the dark, stop. Look away. Someone may have been waiting for this for much longer than you realize, waiting to be seen, waiting to be remembered, waiting simply to be alone anymore. If you've come this far, it's because something about this story touched you. Maybe it was the chills, the silence, or strange feeling that certain presences just want to be seen. And if this made sense to you on some level, even if it's hard to explain, then worth liking and subscribing. Because just as you were impacted by story, now it can reach other people who are also ready to see what no one else sees. Comment the word there, we. That's 3 letters, but for those who understand, it says it all. And look, the next story that appears here has no direct connection to this one, but it holds the same kind of mystery, maybe even deeper, more disturbing. The thing you can't see without feeling. Click to watch. The next revelation may be even harder to forget.